Welcome back to Harbor. We're less than 100 days into the Trump presidency right now, and his relationship with the truth is tenuous at best. Today, the Trump administration unveiled a budget that promoted hard power over soft power. The budget, called the America First budget, slashes funding for foreign aid from the State Department. Let's watch.
This is what we're calling the America First budget. We had an America First candidate. You now have an America First president, and it shouldn't surprise anybody that we have an America First budget. The president believes in diplomacy, and we believe that this budget protects that core function of the State Department.
But when the president's credibility is down, should the United States be retracting from its role abroad? Can our allies still count on us? I'm now joined by the roundtable, Nayyera Haq, former State Department spokesperson, Mark Jacobson, senior fellow with the Pell Center for International Relations and former senior advisor to the Secretary of Defense, and Ann Guerin, diplomatic correspondent for the Washington Post. So I don't really like the word America First because it has remnants and it's redolent of the 1940 situation where people were saying we're not going to go fight Hitler for all different reasons, all usually the wrong reasons. So they chose it anyway. But this sort of America, Fortress America mentality, which is not even going to talk to the rest of the world, and it's scary when we're not even going to try to communicate with the world. No more diplomacy, no more trying to international exchanges, no more students coming here, just us all alone, surrounded by this moat of water we think is going to protect us.
Well, I mean, we don't know yet how far down that road the administration will eventually travel. Certainly the outline in the budget suggests a severe retraction from that model of American public diplomacy, American influence, and the theory behind it, which was that advancing American ideals around the world ultimately benefited America by spreading democracy, spreading peace, and lessening the temperature around the world. And that very thought is one that some of Trump's closest advisors, most notably Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis, have voiced publicly. And yet it's not really reflected in this budget. It will fall to Congress to see how much of that old model, including the Fulbrights, frankly, will end up being funded, and how.
Now, Nayyera, we have people around the world who look to us. They're pro-American. They're in Southeast Asia. They're in the Middle East. They're in Europe. Central Europe, Eastern Europe, they're all around the world. They look to us. They read the paper about us. They look to us. They hope we'll be a counterforce against some of the bad guys in the world. And now we're saying, you're on your own.
And this is going to be the challenge, is when you eliminate your soft power or the diplomacy, you end up having to rely, in the end, on your military might. And this is a national security budget that really focuses on the hard power, which is war. It is not a budget that allows the United States to focus on peacemaking and peace building. People around the world admire the U.S., want to come here. That often helps us in these situations when they disagree with us on policy. If we no longer have this level of engagement and we are no longer providing humanitarian aid, we are no longer providing any, for example, support for freedom of the press, democracy and governments, other people will fill that vacuum. People like Putin, countries like China, who frankly do not have, who are ready to do it, and who do not share the ideals of the United States.
Well, I put on top of this a president who's not credible. The president of the United States and the rest of the world says, what's the story on this guy? Well, he's saying things like, you know, the president's wiretapped me, the last president. That's third world crap. I mean, how they not only not communicate, what we are communicating in the front pages of their newspapers is we got something wacky going on here.
Yeah, this administration doesn't understand that American credibility, America's reputation, America's values are the strongest weapon we have.
Right.
You mentioned before America First, the lack of historic literacy amongst members of this administration.
They don't even know what that phrase means, these guys.
They have no idea, and what they've missed out on are the lessons of the last 60 years, which is hard power has limits. There's a value to it, but telling our story abroad, having organizations that can tell America's story to foreigners, engaging at a public level, at a diplomatic level, at a cultural level, is absolutely critical to the U.S. ability to have influence abroad.
And do you think people who voted for Trump wanted to pull back, or they just wanted to be a little more macho, if you will, but they didn't want to pull away from the world? I don't know.
Well, I mean, certainly polling during the election suggested that some of the this kind of the headlines he used then, America First.
Build a wall.
Build a wall, we're going to cut foreign aid. Those went over big. Now we're actually getting to the point where you decide what you're going to pay for and what you're not going to pay for. Remember, I mean, a president's budget is an aspirational document. It never actually turns out the way.
Yeah, but what about the billion? How does he deal with the $1.5 billion to build a wall? The Mexicans were going to pay for it.
Well,
yeah, right.
What happened to that? That's a lot of money to pay for a Mexican wall.
This entire diplomacy budget we're talking about, the State Department and USAID, is less than 1% of the federal budget.
I know.
It is a great investment. Eliminating that and adding more to the military is essentially like rewarding the kid who has a shopping addiction and wants to buy new things, and harming the child who is actually making good investments.
Chris, I want to make one point on this. You have a situation where Mulvaney comes out today and talks about numbers, numbers, numbers. What we didn't hear him say today, in fact, he discounted it, was any sense of a strategy. So if Trump wants to make the nation more secure, wants to have a stronger national security budget, he's going about it exactly the wrong way. To combat violent extremism, you know, remember the old Eisenhower quote, you can't kill communism with a bullet. You aren't going to destroy Islamic extremist ideology with bombs. And Trump is cutting exactly those programs.
And let's talk about the fact that we have problems in the world. I mean, you never know when they're going to pop up. We didn't know the Russians were going to invade Afghanistan, or the Iranian students when they're going to grab our diplomat. We don't know when it's going to blow. But we have to worry about North Korea. And we also have to worry about the fact that if North Korea does something we have a real problem with, we want to be able to get to Beijing, somehow talk to those people and talk this guy out of something horrible. We've got to be able to count on the Germans under Merkel. We've got to count on Theresa May in Britain. We've got to be able to count on our allies. Trump's now, I don't know what they're telling Merkel. She's coming tomorrow. What are they saying to her on the plane? Be careful, this guy's a little, you know, I don't know what. He's been making claims that don't make any sense. It's not exactly the building of an alliance we're talking about here.
Yeah, I mean, Merkel is, you know, arguably the European leader.
She's a grown-up.
I mean, she is the European leader, right?
Yeah.
I mean, she's clearly the most important and influential figure in European governance, and she's the person who has the most to lose if the NATO alliance no longer means what it has always meant, if the European Union and its relationship with the United States no longer means that, and if Russia feels emboldened to do things not that far away from Germany, that she is then it has trickle-down effect to her in refugees, in policy, in all kinds of ways. So she really is an extraordinarily important figure who carries with her a great deal of symbolism for what that relationship is going to end up looking like. Does she trust him? Does he trust her? Can they forge a bond? Will she actually be able to count on him when he says, oh, yeah, I'm in favor of the NATO alliance?
And she's a smart woman. She's bringing with her the CEOs of two of the largest German companies, so that she understands she's talking to a guy who puts business and investments before he puts diplomacy.
Just thank God we didn't have Trump as president back after World War II when we rebuilt Europe, rebuilt the whole trading relationships, rebuilt Germany, rebuilt France, and we're able to stand up against communism all those years till communism fell apart. That took leadership, that took America thinking and not doing this twaddle that's going on right now. The Roundtable's sticking with us, and up next, these two will tell me something I don't know. This is Hardball, where the action is.